In this video, I'll show you how to mix vivid greens and more natural greens that you can use in landscape painting. I'll also show you how you can neutralize green to the point of making black or a dark gray. I included a bonus tip on how to mix dark blue from green and purple, and how to mix cobalt teal. The first color that I'll mix will be light green permanent. It's a vivid green, but you can mix it yourself. One tip is that you can look up these pigment codes and that'll tell you which pigments to use to make this paint. There's 3 different pigments in here: phthalo green blue shade, iridite yellow, and titanium dioxide. I don't have iridite yellow, but I think benzimidazoline yellow should work. Here's a kit of open acrylics from Golden, and they have all the colors in here that I need. I'll squeeze some of this out just so we can compare it to the color that I mix. So this is phthalo green blue shade, and I'll add some of this yellow to it. It's a little bit dark. I can add some white to it. And it looks like I could go a little bit more yellow. I think that's about it. I'll just make a big swatch out of this. So there you go. You don't need to buy light green permanent as long as you have phthalo green blue shade. So there's phthalo green blue shade and phthalo green yellow shade. I'll squeeze that out just so you can see the difference. It's a little bit more yellow and it's lighter. This is the phthalo green blue shade. I'll mix it with a little bit of white. And here's the phthalo green yellow shade mixed with white. This definitely has more yellow in it, and this is more bluish. I think the phthalo green blue shade is more popular. The benefit of using the phthalo green is that you can mix the light green permanent, but you can also use it straight from the tube, which is a much darker and more vivid green. The issue with a green like this is sometimes it looks unnatural if you use it in a landscape painting. That's mentioned in the book Color and Light by James Gurney, and he calls it the green problem. So here's an example where he painted a landscape with the greens that are pretty close to what he saw. So one way to tone down the green in your landscape paintings is to add a warm color to it, such as red or orange. And that's one of the tips that he recommends in this book. I have multiple videos where I review art books. There's a link to it in the description below. I can show you just by adding this naphtha red light. If I just add a little bit of this naphtha red light in there, you can see this gets much more muted. It's a more natural looking green. Then you can modify it by adding more of the phthalo in there and more of the red, and that'll give you a darker green. If you don't have phthalo green, can you use phthalo blue? You can, but it will turn out a little bit darker and it might not be as vivid. So I'll demonstrate what that looks like. This is phthalo blue green shade, and there's also phthalo blue red shade. I'll start with the benzimidazoline yellow light and add a small amount of this phthalo blue. It's pretty close to this color. I don't know if it picks up on the video, but this seems a little bit duller. I could try adding a little bit more of the phthalo blue in there. The light green permanent has white in there, so I could try adding some of that in there. It's still not quite as vivid. So I'll mix in a little bit more blue. That's probably too much. I'll add some more yellow back in there. I'll brush it on this color chip over here. It's actually pretty close. In person, I can see a bit of a difference, but if you don't need the absolute most vivid green, you can get away with using phthalo blue. This is phthalo blue red shade, and I'll compare that to phthalo blue green shade. I'll add a little bit of white to the phthalo blue red shade. And here's what the phthalo blue green shade looks like. I think I need to add a little bit more into this red shade. So this has a bias more towards magenta, and this has a bias more towards green. So when people mention phthalo blue, they usually mean phthalo blue green shade, but this option is available if you need it. I have a color mixing course where I demonstrate the basics of how to mix colors. I cover which colors I use, and I start with easy color mixing exercises. The link is in the description. The issue with phthalo green is it can look a little bit unnatural when you use it for landscape painting. The most common way to deal with that is to add a warm color such as red or orange to the green to make it more natural. If you want a more natural green, you can just buy Sap Green or Hooker's Green. I'll show you how to mix those 2 colors later in the video, but first I want to show you some quick tips on how to mix duller greens from the colors you already have. Ultramarine blue is another very popular blue pigment. I use it all the time, and it has more of a magenta bias to it. It's good for mixing purples, but the other cool thing is you can use it to mix a dull green. I'll squeeze some of this out and show you how you can use this as a shortcut to mix a more natural looking green. I'll use the same benzimidazoline yellow just so it's a good comparison, and a little bit of ultramarine blue. Right away you can tell it's much duller than the phthalo green or the one that I mixed from phthalo blue. So right there you have a nice natural looking green. These pigments are available in different mediums such as oils and watercolors, so you can use these recipes for those mediums too. So that's the ultramarine blue, this is the phthalo blue, and this is a light green permanent. Another favorite formula of mine for mixing a dull green is mixing yellow and black. It's on my color mixing chart. There's a link to it in the description below. So here it is on the chart. I use Hansa Yellow Medium and Carbon Black, and it makes this dull green. And I can demonstrate that for you right now. This time I'll use cadmium yellow primrose and carbon black. So this is a pretty neat trick. People are often surprised that yellow and black makes green. It's often assumed that the reason why it turns green is because the black has a blue tint to it. But I made an entire video about why this happens. There's a link to it in the description below. So I'll just paint in this color chip. The cadmium yellow is much more opaque, so this is good for covering over previous layers. You can see it's quite different. That almost looks brown. You can also add more yellow into it to make like a lighter green. So I'll just brush some of that on there so you can see the difference. I like to keep a tube of Sap Green on hand because it's really convenient to have a natural looking green on hand already. But you can mix it yourself, and I'll show you how you can do that now. All right, so this is golden Sap Green hue. I'll squeeze some of this out just so we can have something to compare it to. The pigments are listed on the back, and those are Phthalo green yellow shade, red oxide. They list nickel azo yellow. All I have is this nickel azo gold, which I think should work. And I also might use some of the benzimidazoline yellow. We'll see how it goes. You don't always need the exact same colors. You can get a pretty close approximation using other colors. And I'll add the nickel azo gold. And you can see it's starting to take on a similar shade as the Sap Green. There is black in there, so I'll add a little bit of carbon black. I might not even need the red oxide because I think this gold color will do it. Maybe a little more black. It might have went a little too dark. I could add some yellow in there, see what that does. And some more of the Phthalo green. I think that's pretty close. I'll brush it out onto the swatch and see what it looks like. Yeah, that's pretty close. And here's what the Sap Green from the tube looks like. It's pretty much the same color. There's another option if you don't like Sap Green. There's Hooker's Green. It's a little bit more opaque and bluish. I have the version from Liquitex. This is pretty old. They don't even make these bottles anymore. So it contains Phthalo green blue shade and isoindolinone yellow. That's a mouthful. I don't have that yellow. I'll just use some other shade. So this is what it looks like. If I spread this thin, you can see it's more bluish, whereas this is more transparent and yellow. So you might like this one better if you don't like the yellow part of this. This color is named after William Hooker. He was a botanical illustrator. He combined gamboge with Prussian blue, and it made this nice green that works well for painting foliage. The problem with gamboge is that it's not light fast. That's the reason why they use different pigments to make this color, and they call it Hooker's Green Permanent, which implies that it should be light fast. So here's the Phthalo Green blue shade. I'll use the same color I used for the Sap Green. And I think I'll put out some of this benzimidazoline yellow medium in case I need it. The basic idea of getting a dull green is just adding a warm color to it. So here's quinacridone magenta. I should be able to get close to this. It might not be totally perfect, but let's see. So here's the Phthalo green, benzimidazoline yellow. I think I'll add some of this nickel azo in there. It looks too dark. Maybe more of the yellow will help. It's not too bad right there. I think that looks a little bit more bluish. I can add a little bit of this Phthalo blue in here. I think that's pretty close. I'll just quickly make a color swatch out of that. So this is Cobalt Teal from Liquitex. It's kind of a bluish green. I figured I'd include it in this video in case you're wondering how to mix it. This is Phthalo green blue shade and benzimidazoline yellow, white. Start by adding white to the Phthalo green. And I also need Phthalo blue green shade. It's pretty close. You really can't get exactly like it, but it's a pretty good substitute. Maybe just a little bit more blue. Should probably mix up more of this just so I can get a color swatch. That's pretty close. I don't know if you can see that in the video, but the Cobalt Teal is a little bit more saturated, but that's not too bad. How to neutralize green. So I mixed up more light green permanent, and people think that because red is opposite on the traditional color wheel, that you can use it to neutralize it. So if you look at my chart, red and green can make a brownish color. If you put a little bit in, it makes the green darker, and then if you add more, it turns brown. So if I keep adding more, it does make that brown color. But an actual mixing complement will turn the color gray. And you might be surprised to find out that dioxazine purple does that to green. Specifically, light green permanent. You can see that makes it like dark gray. It's almost a black. It's a little bit lighter, but that's pretty neutral. So I'll brush some on some paper so you can get a better look at it. You can see that's pretty gray. If I add white in there, it makes a nice gray. So the way that you would use that is, if you want to make the green a little bit less saturated, you could add a little bit of that in there. And you can see it's not as vibrant as it was before. And if you keep adding it, it will turn grayish. And it works the other way too. If you start with a purple, you can neutralize that too with the green. It's easier to see the purple if I add white into it because dioxazine purple is so dark straight from the tube. Now if I add a little bit of the green to it, it starts to neutralize it. So if you want to fade purple out into like a lively gray color, that's one way to do it. One last tip is if you take phthalo green blue shade and add in dioxazine purple, it turns dark blue. Add a little bit more green in there. Now that doesn't mean that you can actually mix a primary blue, because if you look at how dark this is compared to like a cyan, but it's still pretty cool that you can do this trick. I used this formula to make a color matching video where I matched the color with the source. It was fun to do that because people don't expect that you can make a blue from purple and green. Up next, you can check out my color theory playlist. I have in-depth videos on how to mix different colors and videos about color theory. Please subscribe and like this video if you found it useful. Thanks for watching.